Hey guys, it's Amy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day as always. Please like, share, and subscribe. And of course, drop a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'm not going to waste any more time because we need to discuss the University of Idaho murders, particularly with regards to the time frame of their death, the time frame of the 911 call, those who made the 911 call, and several other aspects which I have found confusing since the beginning of this case because nothing has meshed well with the information that we have been given. And as more information has come out, it seems even more off. If you watched my previous videos about this case, you're probably aware of how I question how every victim was actually presumed to be asleep at the time of the murders. Well, now there is a witness that has me feeling fairly confident because every time I hear something new, it really solidifies that I'm right, at least about this aspect, and maybe several others. I don't see how everyone was asleep. Kaylee could not have been asleep when she was attacked. I just don't see it. Maybe she was laying down, maybe she was in the bed, but asleep? I don't think so. Supposedly, she had a lot of stab wounds and defensive wounds. The defensive wounds alone lead me to believe that she was awake and fighting for her life. Per the autopsy, everyone was killed between 3 and 4 a.m. that morning, but Kaylee was making phone calls up until 2 minutes before 3 a.m. But she was asleep right after? She was killed right after? She was drinking that night. So she could have passed out. That's definitely possible. But did she? I don't think so. This is where the latest information comes into play. There was a surviving, unharmed roommate that was on the second floor and heard and saw things. And that is a huge, huge break in this case. It had already been stated that two roommates, Bethany Funke and Dylan Mortensen, were at the home at the time of this incident and had been left unharmed and were sleeping while the murders had occurred. However, it turns out that at least one of them was awake and did hear and see quite a bit. This is Dylan Mortensen, and she says that a little after 4 a.m., she could hear Kaylee playing with her dog in one of the third floor bedrooms. And we know that the dog was found unharmed in the bedroom. What I would want to hear from the witness is if she specifically heard Kaylee's voice while someone was playing with the dog, or if it could have been someone else. Possibly the intruder getting the dog to an area where it would not be in the way or bark. Dylan Mortensen also says that she heard what she believes to have been Kaylee saying someone's here around that 4 a.m. mark. And if Kaylee was heard shortly after 4 a.m., then this alleged time of death between 3 and 4 a.m. goes completely out the window. And the potential for Kaylee to have been awake, as well as the chance of others being awake, becomes very, very possible and likely. Very, very likely. And not just because of Kaylee's actions at that time, but also Xana Kernodle in this video had gotten DoorDash at around 4 a.m. and was also on TikTok at 4:12 a.m. So she clearly was awake after 4, alive after 4, and attacked after 4. So where did we get the idea that it was 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. and that everyone was asleep? This came from the coroner? These girls were awake and doing documentable things after the stated time of death. At this point, it has been confirmed that this happened between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Dylan Mortensen has said that shortly after 4 a.m., she heard someone say, "There's someone here," at which point she looked out of her bedroom and did not see anyone. She looked at her room one more time after she said she heard crying coming from Xana's room. And then she heard a male voice say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Which is very strange, especially when you consider the fact that when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, the only thing he said to police was asking if anyone else had been arrested in connection with this crime. Almost makes it sound like there was someone else. I'm not saying that there was. I just think that's odd, and I'm wondering why he made that comment. But we'll get back to all of that a little bit later in this video, as we continue with the witness, Dylan Mortensen's account of what happened that night. The first 2 times she looked out of her door after hearing some things, she didn't see anything and shut her door. But on the 3rd attempt, she did see something. She saw someone, and presumably she saw the killer. When she opened her bedroom door a 3rd time, she actually saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose, and he was walking towards her. Per Dylan Mortensen's affidavit, she says that he looked to be 5'10" or so, not very muscular, but athletically built, and bushy eyebrows. Dylan did not recognize this man as he walked past her while she stood in a frozen shock phase. She said she locked herself in her room as the man walked toward the back sliding glass door. The back sliding glass door has been mentioned on many occasions, as many people, including myself, believe that it may have been the source of entry for the killer. But now it definitely looks like it was at least the source of exit, and we don't know if it was the front door, which was seen open that night and into the morning by at least a neighbor, as far as I remember, or if it was the sliding glass door on the 2nd level that was both the entry and exit. If we look at a makeshift blueprint of the home layout, then you can see that there is a sliding glass door on the 2nd level that is on the hill in the back and easily accessible for someone who wanted to break in. I have also noticed, by looking at the pictures of this home, that there seems to be a knocked over chair lying on the ground inside the home, just in front of this sliding glass door, which I didn't actually even notice until I was doing this video. I found that interesting, and I have not heard anything about this before. So I'm wondering if there was an attempt to break the door with the chair, if the chair was knocked over during a fight with the intruder, or if this is completely unrelated. But why would there be a chair tipped over in the home? This whole thing sounds absolutely terrifying, which we already knew it obviously was, just based on the crime scene, the fact that the weapon was this hunting knife, and the fact that there were 4 victims found in their beds. But are we to understand that there was an unharmed roommate that basically hid, which is understandable? She heard and saw some scary shit that night and didn't know what to do. But I would think eventually the killer had to have left, not hours and hours later, but fairly soon after. I imagine he didn't stick around. Dylan Mortensen was witness to a masked man walking past her on the 2nd floor hallway and heading towards the sliding glass door at approximately 4:17 a.m. We know he was gone shortly after that. So what was going on? She froze in fear? Okay. I mean, you have to understand, I suppose, that is an extremely frightening situation. But she froze for hours? What happened? We know that his car was seen in the area at specific times and was leaving the area around 4:20 or so. So there was a long stretch of time between witnessing this man presumably leaving the house, assuming something bad, very bad happened, and Dylan going into her room and locking herself in. We've heard from a lot of psychiatrists and a lot of psychologists and such that explain that she went into a fight or flight mode, where she basically hid and lost all track of what was actually happening. And mind you, she probably didn't see any of the actual victims because she went into her room. So any blood she would have possibly seen would have been from the suspect, if she saw any blood at all. I would assume that the suspect, the person that was walking past her, would have had to have had some kind of blood on him. But again, he was wearing all black. It's the middle of the night. It's dark out. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt that she can't necessarily see too much. All she knows is there's someone in the house. She's scared. She goes in her room. And then there were several hours between the incident that she witnessed and the 911 call, at which point she maybe went back to sleep or hid in her room until the next morning when the other roommate, Bethany Funke, woke up. They couldn't get a hold of anyone in the rooms that were now locked and made this phone call to 911. But it was at almost noon the next day, which is mind-boggling. And I don't blame Dylan Mortensen. I don't blame any of the surviving victims because it was a scary, scary situation. And I do understand the psychology of it to a point. I don't know if I can understand 8-something hours worth. It's just very shocking. Very shocking that the phone call wasn't made till many, many hours later. Having looked at different commentary about this case, a lot of people have definitely thrown a lot of shade at Dylan Mortensen for not doing more. And I'll be honest, I thought the same thing until I listened to some of these psychologists explain it. And I don't want to blame her for anything. I'm sure she's traumatized, and I'm sure it was something that her mind just couldn't handle at the time. I will say that even after the 8 hours waiting to call 911, presumably after the other roommate woke up, it's still strange to me that they didn't say more. They didn't notice blood everywhere. This was obviously a violent crime scene. Even if they weren't in the room, this suspect had to have carried some blood with him throughout the hallway, at least to a point. I don't know how he couldn't have. So there had to have been some blood, probably quite a bit. And therefore, I would think that it would be fairly obvious that people were not just unconscious with no understanding as to what happened to them. It would have been very clear that they were dead or dying. So what was the deal with even the statements given in the 911 call? Apparently they couldn't get into the rooms because they were now locked, but to say that they just were worried about a roommate that might be unconscious when there's probably at least some blood on the floor outside of the bedrooms, that's questionable to me as well. Again, I'm not blaming any of these witnesses, any of these roommates. A lot of it is just very unusual when you think about it. They were scared. Some of the statements they made, some of the words they used are weird, but I guess we don't know what we do until we're in that situation. I don't know. What do you guys think? Drop a comment. Let me know. What do you think about the way the roommates handled this? What you've heard so far? What do you think about the 911 call? What they said and how long it took for them to call? Let me know what you think about all of that. Now let's get back to something I talked about earlier in this video regarding when I said that Bryan had asked police upon arrest if anyone else had been arrested in this case, and also learning that the witness, Dylan Mortensen, believed she heard someone say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," or something to that effect. And if that makes it possible that there's a second person involved. The police have not said that there was. They've actually made it fairly adamant that they do not believe that anyone but Bryan KOHBERGER is a suspect in this case. But some of the things that were said and some other things I find very interesting, so I want to briefly discuss that before I end this video. First of all, Bryan KOHBERGER asking police if anyone has been arrested in connection to this case besides him. I assumed that that was basically to throw the police off and have them believing that maybe there was someone else involved. But then if you add the statement that Dylan Mortensen says she heard from the potential suspect at the time of the murders, it adds a little bit more to this possibility. The fact that he said, "I'm here to help you," or at least someone in the home made this statement, offers up several possibilities. Obviously to give them reassurance, but still, my mind goes to the possibility that maybe another person was involved and had already injured people or scared them. And then Bryan went in and acted as if he was actually there to help them as the second party involved, when clearly he wasn't there to help them in any way. Of course, there's also been statements about how Bryan had issues with women in the past. So he was just looking for revenge against pretty women. Or maybe he was the type of person that felt like he was helping them by ending their lives. Who knows how his mind works? But there's just one more aspect that makes the second suspect situation a slight possibility in my mind. And that is the fact that after this happened, Bryan was driving home from Washington to Pennsylvania with his father. So his father was with him very soon after these murders took place, and he was driving with him away from the scene to a state on the other side of the country. And they were driving in Bryan's white Hyundai Elantra. And there was also several times where they were stopped by police for driving erratically and tailgating. And Bryan's dad spoke to the two separate cops from the two separate traffic stops, explaining that his son was driving a bit erratic due to the stress of the drive home and whatnot. Why did his father feel the need to speak up for his adult son? His adult college-educated son. And I'm not saying that because I think you have to be college-educated to be intelligent. I'm only stating that because apparently Bryan always tried to make it seem to other people like he was smarter than everyone. But doesn't the driver usually do the talking? And why was his father making the drive back with Bryan anyway? Sure, it's a long drive, but why? Michael Kohberger took an 8-hour flight to Washington just to drive another 40 hours back with his son. This man flew 8 hours to then drive 40 hours back home just to keep his son company? If Bryan was just going home for the holidays, he would have then have to drive right back to school another 40 hours not long after. So why not just fly round trip? Did he need his car that bad in Pennsylvania? Shit, renting a car would be much easier and much cheaper at this point. Or was it more about removing the Hyundai Elantra that everyone was on the hunt for on the other side of the country? Was his dad doing all this to protect his son that he knew had committed this horrific crime? Did his father have a lot of info on this? What did Dad know, really? And let's not forget, it was Michael Kohberger's knife sheath found at the crime scene. Of course, Bryan could absolutely have had it, but I find it interesting that first an item of his dad's is found at the scene, then he is found driving home with him, which doesn't sound like a huge deal until you consider the traveling this man had to do. He's either Father of the Year or not even close to Father of the Year. And then add the fact that Michael was the one that spoke to the cop, somewhat defending his son, almost like he might have known something. Does anyone else have questions about this? Look, I'm not saying that Bryan Kohberger's father was involved in these murders or even knew about any of it, but I am questioning it. There are a lot of aspects that lead me to question at least his knowledge about what happened. Maybe he knew after the fact, and as a father was trying to save his son. I don't know. What do you think? The police have made it clear that they believe Bryan Kohberger acted alone and there are absolutely no other suspects. And that is certainly possible. I just think that there are many aspects to question that. It would be very difficult to attack and kill 4 people with a knife, especially with 2 people in each room. Do I believe it's possible? Of course. But not easy, particularly if some or all of these victims were awake. And I've made it very clear that I do think at least 1 or 2 of these victims was awake, or at the very least, not in any sort of deep sleep. Simply stated, there are a lot of aspects that have me questioning quite a bit about this case. But I'm going to end it here, otherwise this video is just never going to end. I'll definitely be back with more as I continue looking into this terrible case. Until then, you know the drill. Please like, share, subscribe, and of course comment. And I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, guys.